Donald Trump just announced a 50% tariff on copper. Don't make the mistake of thinking that this is just another tariff headline. Because copper is such an important commodity, this tariff is going to have significant impact on the American market as well as the global market at large. Now, in this video, I'm going to discuss its impact specifically on Africa because the Democratic Republic of Congo is the second largest copper producer in the world. And all of this has been done in the context of a deal between the United States and Congo, where they're exchanging resources for security. I have quite a big theory about this that I don't see anyone talking about. And Africa has not yet realized what is about to happen. For those of you that don't know me, my name is TJ. I'm Nigerian and British mixed. And on this channel, we talk about African geopolitics. So the reason I'm talking about this situation is because the Democratic Republic is in the middle of what I think is a massive trade war between the United States and China, all based around the commodities. Now, there are many levels to this war, and this war is being fought in many ways. This particular situation is one of the economic ways in which war is being waged. And in the case of copper, it massively affects the Democratic Republic of Congo. Well, it actually affects many African countries, but we're focusing on the DRC because the DRC have trade deals in place with the United States specifically. Copper is used in so many things, I can't even list them here, but I'm sure you're aware. Everything from tech to military applications to green energy and renewable applications, copper is completely ubiquitous and highly needed for modern societies to function. The DRC is the world's second largest producer of copper, and it is the largest producer of copper on the continent of Africa. In April 2025, the DRC reached an agreement with the United States to trade security for resources. As I'm sure you're aware, the DRC is involved in a 30-year plus conflict. And do not make the mistake of thinking that this is linear warfare, meaning it's one side versus another. This is a highly complex situation with many factions, many puppets, many proxies, all vying in a lawless area. I made a whole video about the complexity of this situation, but essentially the government of the DRC does not have a monopoly on security in their own country. There are other factions, depending on the regions you're in, that have more power than the DRC's own military forces within the borders of the DRC. Of course, there is the narrative that Rwanda versus DRC are the main protagonists. But for me, the main story is how the world uses these different groups to extract resources for their own benefit. That could mean countries from all over the world, and that could mean corporate entities, again, from all over the world. DRC approached the United States with this deal initially, that they have over 34 trillion in unrealized resources still in the ground. And the idea is that America can get some of these resources in exchange for restoring the monopoly on violence that a country is supposed to have within their borders. From my perspective, approaching the United States was a bad move, although I understand why they did it. It is a desperate situation with many people dying all the time. So once USA had this trade deal in place, they need to secure their assets, right? They need to secure their deal, meaning they suddenly got an altruistic feeling that they needed to go to DRC and intervene in this war because they need stability for the people to live better lives. But a cynical person would say it's actually so that their resource deal can be executed with the minimal amount of fuss. America wants to pay the cheapest price possible, which means exerting the least amount of force and military effort in order to make sure they secure those resources. So this is the first part of my theory. The idea that this peace deal between Rwanda and Congo that America has brokered was done not for the betterment of the people, but was done to underline this trade deal that the United States have got. They're protecting their own interests. As of yet, I've not heard anyone make this connection. The United States gets to look like heroes, like freedom fighters, like people that are for the betterment of Africa. And this is great for the PR and propaganda of the United States. I connect this also to the message that we've seen being touted by the America's African journalists. And I've made a whole video on the betrayal of Haryana Veras, who keeps repeating the trope Donald Trump deserves a Nobel Peace Prize for the deal that he's made between the DRC and Rwanda. So once the peace deal was made, boom, now Trump starts to play his hand. And this is something outside of maybe what the DRC would have been expecting, which is a 50% tariff on all copper entering the United States. Now, it's not been publicly acknowledged or publicly stated, but I believe if you've got a security for resource deal in place, you go to the trouble of setting up a peace deal, then the likelihood that the United States would keep that 50% tariff for the DRC is unlikely. This is where the controlling of the market starts revealing itself. Because to me, it doesn't make any sense to create a huge tax on a commodity that you've just made a deal on. Essentially, the United States have secured a pipeline to raw copper back to the United States, which is likely to shift the dynamics of the global supply chain. Of course, the stated effect of this 50% tariff is to boost the domestic copper industry, which is something that Trump supporters are always in favor of. It's the same reason why MAGA love the term drill baby drill, because it's the idea of bringing industry and manufacturing back onto United States soil. So again, Trump gets to look like a hero to his own people. But I believe this is a dangerous game and it could backfire. It could backfire for the DRC and it could backfire for the United States. And if the United States lose, the DRC probably going to lose as well. Now, the thing about a deal like this is it doesn't exist in a vacuum. China is a big player in this game as well. China has influence and reaches into DRC as well to extract copper. And in fact, China is the biggest copper processor on the planet. On top of that, China controls most of the world's deep water ports. So they have logistical infrastructure that the United States does not. See, while the United States is out there building military bases, 750 of them or however many they've got all around the world, many of them in Africa, China doesn't really have many, if any, military bases around the world. That's not its game plan. What its game plan is to capture the world's deep water ports. And it has done so. So China can put its own chokes on what passes in and out of its ports, its own taxes on what can pass in and out of its ports, its own influence on what can pass in and out of these ports. And by the way, if we ever get into a situation where there is a conflict, those ports will be key strategic positions for China to control. You see, war requires logistics. And if you control the world's logistics, then hey, you're probably going to win that war. This is a key vulnerability in the United States strategy, and we're going to have to see how this plays out. But like I said, the battleground is in Congo, but the players are China and the United States. And the thing is, DRC is probably going to get mixed up in the middle of this. And let's just be honest, I don't know if it's going to be all that good for DRC. You see, what DRC needs is manufacturing itself. It needs to process itself. It needs to not just export the raw material. Now, United States isn't providing infrastructure, isn't providing electricity, isn't providing expertise and knowledge on refining copper. All they're doing is providing security. So it means that DRC, with their poor infrastructure and roads, cannot even get themselves to the point where their infrastructure allows them to become a refiner and enhancer of copper so that they can sell it after adding value. This is the colonial trap, ladies and gentlemen. You see, we keep hearing about the United States saying, instead of aid, we're going to trade. But the thing is that aid served the neo-colonial extraction of resources. And now we're seeing a situation where trade also serves the neo-colonial extraction of resources. Does it really matter if it's aid or trade if that is the result? But Trump, in all his wisdom, I don't think has made enough calculations about this, because the US has its own faults when it comes to copper. They also don't have the type of deep industry available to refine their copper to the standards so that it can be used. They actually currently export much of the copper that they produce because they don't have the capacity to do this refining that is needed. This is a major flaw in the tariff. the most likely thing that's going to happen is that they will bring more copper into the country, whether it's through the 50% tariff or the deal with Congo, doesn't matter. And the price of copper will go up because they don't have the capacity to refine their own copper on ground anyway. This will end up being very unpopular. From my research, it seems that the United States will need between 7 and 10 years if they focused on it right now to get their copper refining infrastructure to the standard where it could handle the kind of copper that they use. So this deal on the surface brings peace to DRC and finances to DRC. They get to sell their raw materials. But it doesn't do what DRC really needs, because the likelihood is the peace won't last and the DRC don't get to refine their resources on ground. That's what America's trying to do back stateside. Now, if the United States persist with this, I think they're going to have to deploy considerable military resources into that region. We're talking about a landmass the size of Alaska, California, and Texas combined. If the United States have to keep pumping money and resources into maintaining this deal, they may end up deeming this as something not worthwhile. And then the whole situation falls apart. They're just left without the supply chain of copper and a 50% tariff that is massively pushing up the price because they can't handle their own copper production as it is. My guess is that the conflict will continue, will get more violent. Therefore, the DRC people and the Rwandese people and everyone involved will pay a horrible toll. You know, they will be the biggest losers because of the kind of deaths and suffering conflict brings. We're going to have to watch this situation very closely. I don't think it's going to go the way the DRC thinks, because we're already seeing the United States use them as a chess game in their attempt to chokehold the copper market globally. And if Trump has not played his cards correctly, this will be a disaster for him politically as well. It is my belief that the United States empire is on the decline. They are not ready to accept that China and the multipolar world is advancing way beyond what the United States is comfortable with. The United States is going down kicking and screaming. Not only are they doing global military conflict, but they're doing economic warfare. And if they lose, it will accelerate the loss of the empire's grip on the global economy. Meanwhile, Africa and China are getting closer and closer. China sits there with its ports, with its infrastructure. China continues to build airports and roads, and it continues to win over Africa. Also, China's got the refining capacity. I mean, you know, for me, I think it's a win. But if this idea fails of Trump, China are going to win even bigger, because all the refining power will stay with China. They will be the ones with the true control over the copper market, and the United States economy will have to play ball with them. For me, I think Africa needs to wake up. They need to make deals, not just for security, but for infrastructure, for education. Because the other angle to this is, even if you had the infrastructure there, Congo doesn't have the personnel to actually do the refining. It needs help from the outside to do that right now. So if I was in charge of Congo or any other African country, I would ask, hey, we want experts to come and train our own people so that we know how to do this refining for ourselves. And that goes for copper, but it goes for every commodity, be it gold, oil, whatever it is. I, for one, am going to be keeping a close eye on this situation, especially how the copper pricing goes when this 50% tariff takes into effect. I want to see what the interventions in the DRC from the USA is going to look like on ground in DRC. And I'm going to wait to see if this peace deal will last. I'm not interested in them claiming victory when they announce the deal. I'm waiting for victory to be claimed only when the results of the deal are very obvious. If we do not see lasting peace, then we should not be talking about Nobel Peace Prizes for Trump at this stage. And let him prove that he's made this lasting peace that he's talking about before we do any of that. You know, I'm here hoping this will not be a painful lesson for the DRC, but my theory is now out there in public. I'm sure you guys out there have many opinions about this. I would love to hear about them in the comments section. But if you have nothing to say, would it be too much for me to ask you to write the words "Wake up, Africa" in the comments section? It just lets me know that you've watched the video to the end, you like what I'm doing, and you want me to continue. Thank you so much for joining me for this video today, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.